Let's take you now live to the Constitutional Hill in the heart of Johannesburg, where a ceremony to mark the 30th anniversary of the Apex Court will take place today. It was established back in 1995 to uphold and protect the rights of all South Africans. President Cyril Ramaphosa is set to deliver the keynote address at that event. Newzroom Afrika's Ziyanda Ngcobo now joins us live from there. Very good morning to you, Ziyanda. I guess every now and then when you and I get an opportunity to go and cover stories about the Constitutional Court, it is just about that. It's about interpreting the law and interpreting what the Constitution says. But this is an institution that actually brings life and breathes life into even the preamble of the Constitution.
That's right, Aldrin. The building that we are sitting in is a beacon of hope. It is a physical representation of our country's democracy and the hard-won gains that were made by someone who I'm also going to be interviewing just now, the likes of Justice Albie Sachs, the sacrifices they have made. And this is a moment for us to pause and really reflect on what it took to have the Constitution that we have and the doors of the Constitutional Court opening so that the country that we now enjoy, the freedom that we now enjoy, what does it really mean 31 years since the end of apartheid? And on that note, I'd like to bring in Justice Albie Sachs. On that particular note, I mean, you were one of the first justices of this particular court. And let's start off on that day when the late former President Nelson Mandela reflected on how the last time he was in a court, it was for him to be sentenced to death. And fortunately for him and his comrades, that did not happen. But now he was standing in a different court under different circumstances.
I remember it so well. It wasn't this amazing building. It was temporary accommodation. Yes. And we were so excited. This was really starting something completely new. From the beginning, we had nothing. That's not true. We had one chair. One chair, not a book, no rules, no structures, but we had a constitution. And we had the people waiting. People wanted something. They wanted a sense of justice and fairness. They wanted government and people exercising power who were chosen by them to do so in an honest way with integrity. And the court's job was really to maintain that and to have some kind of decent basic rules for the society. South Africa, we're such a mixture, an amazing mixture, a marvelous mixture, but the mixture was used for oppression, for division, exclusion. Now how can we get the benefits from being so diverse, speaking so many different languages, such different rich histories? And you need rules of the game, recognition that everybody matters, and a sense of rights, that people have rights. You're not begging government for some kind of, to be pity, to take pity on you, to be nice. You're saying, I'm a human being, I have rights. And somehow we felt this whole enterprise was involved not with black letter, boring, detailed law. You need that, it's important, but basically with human dignity, equality, freedom. And this building that we're sitting in now, we had extraordinary days here, fierce arguments, sometimes tears amongst the judges. Yes, judges cry, but always dedicated to upholding the things that we've been fighting for. I don't like the word sacrifice. For me, the sacrifice would have been to do nothing. That would have meant sacrificing my soul, my spirit, just to become rich and be important. So we regained our souls, we regained our spirit, we regained our courage, and it was a joy working with 10 other colleagues, very different backgrounds, but somehow beginning to look like and speak like and sound like South Africa.
The finest in society is what Mandela used to describe the first justices of the court at the time, but 31 years into our country's democracy, 30 years since the doors were open, there are lots of questions, Justice, about how the Constitution translates into the everyday life of South Africans. We have many challenges in society. Whilst we've had beautiful landmark cases, there are also issues that South Africans feel are pressing. How does it feel to hear comments like the Constitution doesn't work for me, it actually works for criminals? How do we deal with that?
Okay, that one I don't accept, that it works for criminals. It works for ordinary people. It could work better, much, much better. And there's so much we take for granted. We take it for granted. We can vote. And we take it for granted if the government loses, they step down. That's huge. We take it for granted we can speak our minds. We couldn't in the old days. We'd be banned, silenced. We take it for granted you can see the films you want, write the books, you can move around. That didn't happen before. So the Constitution is there saying never again. That's important. The Constitution's there for workers. Workers have the right to fair labor practices. They go to conciliation. Thousands all the time are doing that, take for granted. If a woman is pregnant and she decides, for whatever reason, her health or that this is my body, my choice, she can go to a hospital, she'll be counseled by the doctors, she can get a decent nurse, and she can have a termination. That's taken for granted. In other countries, in South Africa, it wasn't so. It was backstreet abortions, it was death. So there's so many things like that that are just part and parcel of our life. They're very, very positive. We still have massive unemployment. We still have lots of racism. We still have inequality. The Constitution says South Africa belongs to all who live in it, united in our diversity. But it doesn't, the land doesn't actually belong to everybody here. So there are those problems. But what the Constitution does is it gives us pathways to challenge the things that we don't like, to speak out, to organize, to say what you like. And South Africans say what they like. South Africans speak out. Sometimes it's hurtful. Sometimes it's painful. Sometimes they even say terrible things about the judges who are working so hard. But that's freedom of speech. And so these are all the positives that we have with lots of negatives around us.
I want to touch on that note because over the years we've seen how politicians have continuously and deliberately launched attacks on the South African judiciary as a whole for various reasons. How does that make you feel in light of how it could also be seen as eroding the trust and the independence of our judiciary? Just yesterday I covered a briefing where a politician was scathing of Justice Zondo and the arrest of former President Jacob Zuma, that also does land somewhere in our society and could be taking us backwards.
Okay, so it's important to keep our composure. There are people who rattle and shake and make a noise and denounce, scream even, and maybe they're hurting because they've done something wrong. They've been caught out, the law's taken its course, and the judges have upheld the Constitution. And that's their job, without fear or favor, not to be intimidated, not to be bullied. And that goes to some extent with the territory. I had the pleasure of taking Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg of the U.S. Supreme Court on a tour of this very court building. She says the most beautiful courthouse, she called it, that she knows in the world. She would get 5,000 hate letters a year. That's a record not achieved in South Africa. So it's not something exclusive to South Africa, those sorts of broadsides against the judges. And I think my colleagues have been very serene, calm. The answer is get on with your work, do your work. Don't be deviated by those attacks.
On a more personal note, Justice, how does it feel 30 years since the doors of the Constitutional Court were opened, being in this building, watching your colleagues, you handed over the baton, and the work that's been done by this court?
You know, I didn't want to go after 15 years. Somebody like you with the microphone, well, Justice Sachs, how does it feel on this last day? I don't want to go. I was like a child, I don't want to go. And then I had some judgments to finish off. And then I had one little bit of power left. This finger could press a button and it opened the door for 1 year. And I would feel I've still got some power in the court. And then the year passed and I lost even that bit of power. So now I come as a visitor. And we also get the news briefings from the court, media reports, very, very helpful. It was Richard Goldstone and I who pushed for that. So the journalists could pick up the essence of the case. often technical language, very, very long, different opinions by different judges, providing those summaries. And I find, I'm not sure if it's 9 out of 10 or 19 out of 20 times I'm with the majority decision of the court. They're doing their work. And I'm particularly happy to be here now, to be able to see Justice Mandisa Maya, a woman, sitting as Chief Justice. She's not there because she's a woman who got there. I sometimes had to look at her judgments on appeal. I remember noting at the time, there's somebody who's smart, who's independent, who's got her own position and vision, good organizer, a team worker, eloquent, comfortable in herself and her manner. So I just feel this is amongst lots of things we're doing right. There are things we're doing wrong in this country. That's one of the things that we're doing right. And I'm impressed by the quality of the decisions that come out and the thoughtfulness. We were building an institution. We weren't just solving cases at that time, creating an institution. And the new generation of people, the great majority of whom were oppressed by apartheid, they're close to the communities, they speak the language of the country, they are now the core of the court. It's not just progressive-minded people fighting the injustice of apartheid who grew up maybe in affluence and had to overcome advantage, not overcome disadvantage. And they bring a certain texture, a certain resonance that maybe we didn't have to the same extent. Justice Yvonne Ngcobo was from that kind of background. She was the precursor now of people from the communities rising up through work, through the ranks, through being noted, through being encouraged, through working with others to become a top judge in the country. I'm very, very, very proud of the Constitutional Court of South Africa 2025.
Justice Albie Sachs, thank you so much. We're indebted to you as a country for all that you have done to contribute towards reaching such a milestone. Aljan Sampier, 30 years since the doors of the Constitutional Court were opened, and he was one of the first justices sitting not particularly at this venue at a temporary accommodation, but certainly one of those laying down the foundation to a moment where we have our first black woman Chief Justice in the form of Mandisa Maya, who of course we'll be seeing later on today when proceedings get underway, overseeing that program. It's a full circle moment for many like Sachs, who were part and parcel of the struggle, one of the drafters of the Freedom Charter and our country's constitution. And now the baton has firmly been handed over at least 5 times with 6 Chief Justices since the dawn of democracy.